We are given a graph here that shows two functions, f of x in blue and g of x in black dashed. And then we're asked a series of questions using the function notation. So for example, we're asked, what is f of 5? And what that is asking is, when we plug in an x value of 5, what is the output of this function? In other words, in this case, what is the y value of the function? And so when we look at x is equal to 5 for this, we're going to get that we look over here where we have x is 5, and we can see that the y value then is going to be 0. So f of 5 is equal to 0. And then here we're asked, what is g of f of 5? And so here the idea is that we're going to work our way outwards from the innermost function here. So what we first do is evaluate what is f of 5. And so when we look at our graph here, we can see again that f of 5 is 0. And so what this means is that what we're now being asked is what is g of 0, because we're replacing f of 5 with 0. When we go look at 0, we can see that g of 0 right here on the graph gives us a output for g with the input of 0. The output is equal to 0. So g of f of 5 is equal to g of 0, which is equal to 0. Okay. So then we're asked, what is f of 1? So a function, the output of a function can then be plugged back into that same function. So in this case, we're asked, okay, what is f of 1? So we go to 1 and we look at what the output of the function f is when x is equal to 1, and that gives us, at this point here, that f of 1 is equal to 3. And so this then becomes if f of 3, because now we've replaced f of 1 with 3. And so now we're saying, well, what is f of 3? And when we go to the graph and look at when x is 3, what is the value of f? The value when x is 3 is 1, so we get that f of 3 is equal to 1. So f of 1 is equal to 1. In this last question, we're being asked, what is the value of g, and we have this -1 exponent here of 1. And what this means is, what is the value of g inverse of 1? And in this case, what we're doing is, and basically what an inverse function does is it undoes what the original function does. So if you plug a value into g, for example, let's say we plug in the value 7 into g, what gets returned to us is 3, because g of 7 is equal to 3. What the inverse function does then, it says if you plug in the value 3, it'll take you back to 7. So whatever we plug in to the original function, we take the output of that, and then when we plug that output into the inverse, it takes us back to the original value that we plugged in. So what it does is it swaps every x-y pair. It swaps the y for the x and the x for the y. So what we need to do here is, when we're asked what is g inverse of 1, instead of going to the value of 1 on the x-axis, we go to the value of 1 on the y-axis. We go over and see, well, what is the x value associated with 1 for the function g of x? And when we go down, we see that it's equal to 4. So g inverse of 1 is equal to 4. And again, the reason is, when we go find where g has a y value of 1, we can find that the x value associated with that is 4. And so that gives us the inverse value of g. All right, so for this next one, we have a bunch of different things all stuck together. So just like we did before, the first thing we do is we go and we find out, all right, what is f of -4? So we get f of -4. When we look on our function, we see that f of -4 is equal to 1. So that means we're going to replace f of -4 with 1, and so now our function is going to be g inverse of f of 1. And when we go look at f of 1, we can see that f of 1 is equal to 3. We found that before. So we go to 3 and we go up and see that our value that we get for that is 3. So now we have as our next step that we need to find G inverse of 3. And what that means is that we have to look at our function G and find out when we go to the y value of 3 for that, what is the associated x value? And so when we go and look at that, we can see that it gives us an x value of 7. And so g of -1 is equal to 7. And so the answer at the end of all this is that g inverse of f of -4 is equal to 7. So again, to repeat, we did f of -4, which gave us that when we plug 4 into f, we got 1. We then plug 1 into f, and when we plug 1 into f, we got 3. We then plug 3 in as the y value for g to find out what's the x value that goes with that, and that gave us an x value of 7. And so that's how we ended up with g inverse of f of -4 is equal to 7 as our final value.